There it is. Can you see me, folks? Who knows? There it is. Seems to be working. Excellent. Hey folks, how you doing? Hopefully you can hear the guitar. There it is. Seems to be. Hey man, how you doing? I've had a nightmare of a time trying to get this bloody thing going. It just would not work. Frustrating as heck. Hopefully you can hear everything okay. Oh, thanks man, I appreciate that. I gotta say, OBS software is not my favorite thing in the world. I probably should put my headphones on, make sure I'm out all of that. For my microphone. Oops, sorry. Okay, there we go. That's better. Now I can hear my voice. Yeah, OBS is not an intuitive software at all. I just could not get it to connect. It's so frustrating. Sometimes it works, sometimes it connects. It was trying to connect into an old email, an old account again. I've got some new gear in to check out. I've got the H-Cab from Red Sound, which I plugged it in and I looked at it and it's got two 4-inch speakers in it and a tweeter. And I thought, how's two 4-inch speakers going to sound good on guitar? Thing sounds awesome and it's so light. I think it weighs about 4 kilos or 5 kilos or something, which is about 8 or 9 pounds, whatever that is. You pick the thing up, it weighs nothing. It's tiny. It's back there somewhere. You probably can't see it. Man, really good. Super impressed. And the other thing I've got in is I've got a power amp and a Red Sound what's it called? You can see it over there on top of the boogie. It is a RPA 300, so that's a stereo power amp. Only cabinet I have at the moment is the Mesa Boogie Revolver in the corner there. And that thing sounds great. And man, yeah, really impressed with it. I had a student over yesterday. He came around for a lesson and he said, man, that's a great tone. He was really happy with his guitar sound going through it, and it was just like pretty simple. But I've been bearing with OBS because it's I think it's a better system than trying to use the YouTube one. I think the YouTube one generally sucks. Let's go up to that and see if that makes any difference. YouTube tends to it does weird things with the audio. Does anyone else find that too? It's like almost like it seems to think that guitar is not a guitar, that guitar is like background noise and just starts like messing with it. Super happy with this guitar at the moment. I took this out to a couple of gigs in the weekend. I did a jazz trio gig, which is something I don't do very often these days, but it was for a friend for his dad's birthday, so we went out and played some background jazz stuff. Well, it didn't end up being background, it ended up being pretty much foreground, like they were really into it, which was awesome. And we just played some music and jazz tunes, you know. And so I set the guitar a little different. Usually I'd run the volume control back a little bit, and what that does is, because it's got a treble bleed on the volume control, when I turn it down, essentially I'm making it a little, winding off bottom end. It's set up on full. If I turn it down a bit, you can hear the difference between it, right? But so I ran that up on full and I'd kind of turn the tone control down. No, that doesn't get rid of it. Oh no, I can do it here. Hang on. No idea. I don't know how to deal with it. So you're hearing a little bit of this microphone picking up my guitar. So we were supposed to play that. We never ended up playing that on the gigs. Boat says, I'm good, thanks. I've been working on an Andrew York chord melody book. I don't know that one. I'm a bit stumped reading notation when there's different rhythm within the voice. Any voices? Any tips? There's a couple of things you can do. If I ever find rhythms that I'm kind of stuck with, you can try clapping them out. That often helps, because then you're just focusing on just the rhythm and not kind of having to apply notes to it and phrasing and all those kind of things that you have to do. Just your only focus is the rhythm. That can help. Another thing that I've done too, if it's something like really tricky and I just can't seem to get my head around it, which doesn't happen very often these days, but occasionally, I'll actually go into MuseScore, which is the notation program that I use, and MuseScore is really good. Like, it's fantastic, and it's free. I use MuseScore 4, but you can use Sibelius. I used to use Sibelius for the longest of the time. Finale, whatever notation program, use MuseScore. It's free, why not? And it's really powerful. And just manually put the notes in, and then at least you can hear it back, and that might get you through the bar that you're stuck on. Give that a try. I found that really useful. Would help if he says it would help if I can access the original CD, but I've got to use my notation reading brain. Wish me good luck. Wish me luck. Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, good luck, dude. It's one of those things, isn't it? Like, there was a phrase in the show I did last weekend with the orchestra, and it was kind of tricky. It went. So you had a 9/8 bar followed by a 4 bar, whatever it was. It was kind of like a really tricky phrase. The whole orchestra struggled with it, but particularly me, because wanted me to put like heavy distortion on. It was more this kind of tone. Do that again. So we're going from like a groove, like whatever the song was. So it was that sort of thing, and it was really quite a tricky phrase to try and get right, and especially with the rhythm section, we're playing all these hits that kind of lined up sometimes with what I did and other times not, and I could play the phrase by myself okay-ish, but then when I got in to play with the orchestra the first time we did it, it just didn't make sense, trying to line it up, and the conductor just actually sent me his Sibelius file, which was, that 1 bar. And once I heard it in context and kind of how it all goes together, because there was no recording, it was just something that he imagined in his mind. And I talked to him about it, and he said he was thinking like a Frank Zappa type thing. And I went, okay. So it was meant to be pretty dissonant and crazy, and with this idea that it leads into the next tune with all this kind of pizzazz. It was really tricky. Even the orchestral musicians struggled with it. The orchestra string players, you know what I mean? And those guys can read anything, usually. But so once I had the recording of it, it just made it so much easier. Yeah, cool. I've heard of MuseScore. I have Guitar Pro will work. The book is the second book of his Jazz for Classical Cats book series. I don't know it. I'll have to check it out. Thanks. I'm always up for looking for new resources. Hopefully this is coming through all right. I'm just loving this guitar at the moment. I'm finding this is just works so good for me. Probably not for someone else. And believe it or not, it's actually a blue guitar. You can't really see it very well. It looks black in this. This is one thing I like about it too. If you have it on that angle, it looks black. But then if you get the light on it, you can see it's blue. But it's actually faded lots. It used to be like quite a bright blue. I mean, this is 2001 model. So what's that, 24 years old? Yeah, so next year will be its 25th birthday. So that's quarter of a century, and I think Porritt Smith had some issues with their finishes back in the day, because I've seen a few of them like this that have kind of faded like that. My friend Nick in Los Angeles, he's got one that kind of looks brown now. It's just kind of how it's gone. Like that. And one thing I like about this is it's kind of Strat sounding, but not really Strat sounding. It's sort of fatter. I like the scale length. I think my favorite scale length is 25-inch scale. And it's funny, isn't it, that like both Gibson and Fender never arrived at 25-inch scale. Fender was 25.5, Gibson was 24 3/4. Just why wouldn't it be 25? That makes the most sense when you think about it, right? It's an even number. I'm sure they had their reasons. I know Porritt Smith has said that he went for 25 because I think it was a Rickenbacker guitar he had or something like that that had that particular scale length, the 25-inch scale length, and he felt that that was kind of still able to bend easy, you know, without too much issue like that, but kind of comfortable for chords down here and not too bunched up here. Because that's one thing I find with 24 3/4 is just getting a little bunched up here. And then, you know, when you get down here, it's feeling really nice on 24 3/4, but not so good on the 25.5, for me at least anyway. So this kind of solves all those. One thing I love about this guitar is just rings. It's a bit noisy. You can hear it almost sounds like it's going into feedback. And one thing I've realized too since I've started playing this more is that how much tremolo is really a big part of what I do. Daniel, how are you? It's a super specific question. What scale would you recommend over a progression that is 4 beats F sharp minor, 2 beats D minor, 2 beats of F sharp minor, and then 4 beats for D major for 4 beats? Okay, so the thing with that is there's no relationship between those, right? Like if we look at F sharp minor, right, that is what it is. Then we go to the D. Well, D would be a flat 6 away. So we could think, well, maybe Aeolian, but then you've got A in there. Well, that's the minor third. C is like a flat 5. So the flat 5 automatically already contradicts the C sharp that we would have had on the other chord, right? And then F, the major 7. So there's really no scale that nicely fits the two. So a better way to approach that is to just play each chord change, right? In which case I would go, well, what flavor of F sharp minor is it? And that's kind of the tricky thing sometimes, right? Because F sharp minor on its own could be anything, right? So that's partly why I never like to particularly think of like things in keys. You'll often hear me talk about things like in terms of the relationship, like so functional harmony. So I'll say it's a 1 chord to a 4 chord to a 5 chord. Then in that instance, what happens is you start to go, oh, now this chord has a relationship to the next chord. Then you can kind of know, right? So it could be Aeolian. Right, that totally works. But it could also be Dorian. Could be harmonic minor. Right? And then when you go to D minor, I'd do the same thing. Play its own scale sound. I probably in that instance would play. I'd probably play Dorian, because the Dorian note is in the home key is the 4th. That sort of feels like it. No, actually, I like the melodic minor better in that instance. That sound, right? And then the D major. On the D major, I'd probably go Lydian. And the main reason is, if we think again about the home key, we're going to this F sharp. G is the, in relation to the home key, it's not actually on the home chord, we're thinking on the D major chord. It's a flat 9, whereas G sharp is the natural 9. So in the home key, its relationship to it feels better. And the other thing too is Lydian tends to sound more correct to most people's ears in music. I've noticed this if I have people come for a lesson and I ask them to play a major scale, and they don't, and especially beginners, they don't really know what they're playing. Not that I teach beginners very often anymore. These days I pretty much only teach advanced students, but I used to teach beginners, and especially when I do workshops. The interesting thing about teaching workshops is you turn up, you don't know who's going to be there. There could be 10 people, there could be 100 people, and there'll be a range of players. There'll be people who are just beginners and people who are really advanced, and so therefore you kind of like, it's hard to kind of target everybody, right? But what I've noticed with beginners anyway is that if you get them to play a major scale, you give them a note, say this note, a D major note, they'll almost every time, if they're using their ear, they'll go. Right? When it should be, for a major scale, it should be. And the reason that happens is if I play a D major chord, right, they'll and they play it over it, they'll go dun, dun, and this note here clashes, right? The 4th clashes with the 3rd, right? Whereas the sharp 11, it's a tone away from the 4th, so the ear will tell them that this sounds more correct. Lydian. So they'll almost always go for Lydian when they're using their ears, right? And so I would go F sharp Aeolian on that, and then on the D minor chord I'd go jazz minor or melodic minor, and then F sharp Aeolian, and then D major, Lydian. Hope that helps. Question: what is your approach to fretboard visualization? Yeah, so there's a couple of ways I kind of do this. I think it's really useful to know the names of the notes. So there's a couple of things you can do to kind of learn them if you don't know them already. But so this is an F. Try and find the F on the next string, next string, next string, next string. All right. And just learn all of those, right? And then that's kind of a way of visualizing where all those notes are, right? And then going C, G, D, without any thought. And of course the flat keys like G flat and D flat are harder. But being able to do it that quickly, right? And it shows that you've kind of learned the notes on the fretboard. And what I find that useful with that is that I can be thinking what they are in relation to chords. Now I do this when I practice. When I play, I forget about everything, right? I just get on the bandstand and kind of, I ask questions of myself all the time, like, and of the music. If we're playing, I kind of go, what needs to happen on the bandstand right now? Like, is the groove happening? If not, then I try and lock it down, so it is happening. Is the harmony being stated when it needs to be? Um, is it too busy? Can I back off? Should I play more? Like all those kinds of questions, right? Those are things that I kind of those are kind of questions I look at. But when I'm practicing, I work on trying to visualize where those notes are. I find learning scales and stuff super useful, and trying to be as thorough as I can with, say, something like G major. Right, and being able to know that all across the fretboard, every position, all that kind of stuff helps with visualizing it. I don't think there's anything wrong with visualization. I think sometimes people think, oh, you're kind of cheating if you're kind of picturing shapes. You need to learn everything by memory. I don't think that at all. I think piano players think shapes, saxophone players think fingerings. We can think shapes too. Right, so I kind of look at it that way. I like to look. I basically, my approach to everything is, and you don't necessarily need to know 10 million things, but I try and learn some things 10 million ways. So I really try and go deep on it. And then when I play in practice time, like if I'm playing over a track or something, I'm picturing what notes are in relation to chords. I'm trying to play chord changes. I'm trying to like create melodic ideas. It depends on what I'm particularly working on, but I hope that helps. Hi Simon, how are you? He says, great. I just checked in and managed to catch the live stream for a change. I'm enjoying this. I need to work harder at some of this stuff. Oh, awesome. I'm glad you're here. I hope it's sounding okay. I'm using OBS, which I think is a good software. Daniel says, thanks so much. I appreciate it, man. Oh, no worries. He says, my friend writes some really interesting music in his own style. Awesome. Those sound like some fun chord changes. A lot of my practice actually is just doing that. Like taking a chord like F sharp minor and D minor that are unrelated and seeing how can I work on those, right? So I would look at that and I'd go... So you can see there, I kind of stumbled upon a couple of things with that I started realizing pretty quick. It's quite early in the morning here too. It's 10:30 a.m. So not feeling particularly warmed up. I played a little bit before this, but not much. I'd ideally like to warm up a little bit more, but them's the breaks. But I started to notice there that I could go F sharp minor, right, on the one chord. So thinking F sharp minor, and then go F major. because F major over D minor is essentially the relative major, right? And it gives you D minor 9. But that's a cool sound. You could also do something like had just occurred to me then. Instead of F sharp minor, play A major over it, right? The relative major. So A major to F major. Same two chords, but just you're approaching it from its relative major. That's kind of cool because that approach gets you away from thinking like root notes. When you have interesting chord progressions like that, it's what you want to avoid doing is being like really obvious. And you see the same thing when people play odd meter, right? Like if they play in like 5/4 or 7/8 or something like that, what they end up doing is they end up going 1 2 3 4 5 1 2 3 4 5 1. Like all their phrases end on 1 or start on 1. And the whole idea of like playing in other meters is you want it to feel fluid and flowing, right? So in the same way, if we anchor everything with the root note, which is probably what's going to happen, we're playing a progression like that, it ends up just kind of becoming less interesting than it could be. The other thing to remember too is I'm really enjoying that. That's kind of cool, fun progression. I don't think I've ever played over those changes before. Another thing to remember too is that when you're playing over chord progressions like that, it's to not just get caught up in the two chords, because you could think F sharp minor, D minor. Well, what about F sharp minor and then a leading A, A7 altered in this case, to get us into the D minor, right? And then a leading C sharp 7 altered to get us back to the F, like just approaching stuff with the 5 chord. Need some water, folks. Hope that helps. Yeah. A couple of bands that I kind of like for those sort of chord progressions, like Jamiroquai. You know, those guys, the chord progressions are always interesting in that band. And Incognito, another UK acid jazz. The acid jazz guys kind of got into that, you know, what was called acid jazz in the 90s. But like 7 Days in Sunny June. B minor to F sharp minor, that's all pretty straightforward, right? But then F major, G major, A major, D sus, right? So it's kind of a cool chord progression. Another one that I use quite a bit is Still a Friend of Mine by Incognito. I mentioned a minute ago, you know, D major, C sharp minor, C major, C, B minor, right? And then goes so on and so on. But even if we just take that first progression, sort of try and see if you can play over those chord changes. Even the second half of that song, right? It's kind of got some tricky kind of chord changes. Yeah, so I like bands like that, you know, to kind of things to kind of work on. So you're stuck for stuff to work on, go and listen to some of that stuff. Stevie Wonder's good for that too. Things like Sir Duke. Something like that. Yeah, get the idea. Hope that helps. So like I mentioned earlier, I've got the RPA Red Sound RPA 300 power amp. It's a 1-rack unit. And here I'm checking out, and it's 300 watts per side, which is actually quite a bit. Like, I'm finding like it's pretty grunty. I'm running it through my Mesa Boogie Revolver at the moment, but you could easily power like 2 4x12 cabs off that if you wanted to. And it's kind of, it's an interesting thing, because I thought at first what I'd do is I'd run it and I'd run the fractal into it, because, you know, it's clean power amp, that's the idea, right? And I thought I'd run the fractal into it, and what I'd do is turn the cab modeling off, because now I've got the cab, a real cabinet. But I actually preferred it with the cab modeling on, which was interesting. So it's like, essentially it's got cab modeling plus it's going through a real cabinet. I wonder why that is. But, you know, if you think about the rules, right? If you're using a real cabinet, you turn the cab modeling off in your modeler. Well, why? Do whatever sounds good. And that's what I did. So I kind of did that, and I was really happy with the sound. Interesting thing though, I thought we were all getting away from rack gear. I thought that was such to the 90s, right? Cheers, Joe. I'm glad you like it. Joe says, nice clean tone with those P90s. I really like these pickups. They really work well. And I think partly the reason they work so well for me is having this treble bleed on here, because P90s can be pretty fat, kind of throaty pickups. So, I mean, that's the clean tone on this setting. It's pretty fat and kind of pushing it hard, but if I turn it down a bit, not only does it brighten it up, make it sound more Strat-like, right? It doesn't push as hard, so I can kind of get more range of tones. Maybe for soloing on. interesting thing. I watched the Studio Rats this morning, and Lee and they had Lee on the show, and he was looking to get Lee. What's Lee's surname? Can't remember. But they had an Axe FX and they had a Quad Cortex, and they were comparing them and did a couple of blind tests. And the guy Lee, who was looking to buy one, Lee and Drew, that's who it was. Oh, couldn't even think. And they were kind of comparing them, and he picked the Axe FX every time. And that was my first thought too, was that the Axe FX actually sounded so much better with the same preset. I don't know that, like, a lot of people talk about capturing devices as being like a thing. I don't know that that really matters that much. It doesn't to me anyway. Maybe it does to other people. And I think there's this idea that, well, if you capture your own amp, you're bringing your amp with you. Really, you're not. What you're doing is you're bringing like a snapshot of your amp. You know what I mean? And how well that's captured, what it does, is it all kind of changes things, right? But it also depends on how much processing's going on there, right? Because you also want it to sound like your amp, but you want it to sound like your amp responds with, say, different dynamics, different kind of guitars into it, all those kinds of things, right? And I think that's where modeling kind of has the advantage, because modeling can be as complex as you want it to be, and the tones can be, you know what I mean, like this, right? You can hear all that tonal variation that's happening, right? Because it's modeling, it's not just a snapshot. If that were a snapshot, when I turn the volume down, it would be the same snapshot, right? Which is what a capture is. So I've kind of felt like the whole thing, I can probably change that a little bit. The whole capture thing is largely overrated for me anyway. I mean, yeah, I've only used it a few times, and kind of the results have been okay. And whenever I hear people using capture stuff, I kind of go, it's kind of okay. It's not like blowing my mind. But yeah, the modeling, I think, is kind of where it's at. Yeah. What do you guys think? Curious to know. But yeah, he picked the fractal every time, even when they swapped the order of stuff. And one thing they said that was interesting too is that they said that the Quad Cortex was kind of had been designed more with metal guys, and a lot of metal guys programming it. And I hadn't thought about that before, and I guess it kind of has. Like all the guys that I know that play metal, they generally play Quad Cortex. But anyone I know who plays like a Quad Cortex, who plays other stuff, is Rob Harris, right? Rob from Jamiroquai. Rob plays a Quad Cortex, or two of them, and amongst amps and all kinds of other stuff that he uses. I got to say that I do like the Quad Cortex design of it. I think that is much better than the fractal. It's about the same size as an FM3, maybe slightly bigger, but you get 9 switches or something on it, which is great. I like the whole way the screen seems to work. It just seems very intuitive in that sense. I just wish the sounds were better. I don't know. Here's the middle pickup. I just don't really use middle pickup. I don't know why. I'd rather go like those two. And now I'm out of tune. Go figure. Oh, come on. There we go. Let's tune up. You know why they call it tuning up? Because you should always tune up to the note, not down. It's summertime here in New Zealand, so it was like super hot yesterday. Such a great song. Bonnie Raitt, you know? It's just that's one of the real tug at the heartstrings type songs, isn't it? You know what I mean? Can't, you know, singing about making someone else love you, you know what I mean? Crazy. Yeah, so that's the Fractal. What's have I got here? Oh, this, quite like this kind of sound. That's one thing with this setup too, is that P90s can be super noisy. Anyone who's used them before knows that they're some of the worst when it comes to noise, right? They just, I don't know what it is. I think it's the wide magnetic field it has or something. How are we going for time, people? I usually try to keep these two. How do I find that out? Doesn't tell me. Must do. Where does it say it? Oh, there we go. 42 minutes. Found it. P90s. Now that's because my computer monitor's there, so it's sort of gonna pick that up, right? But they're one of the worst for noise. But put two pickups on. And sometimes I'll do that, it's kind of flip between the bridge pickup and the tube position. And you have the same on the neck pickup too, right? So if it's getting noisy. I saw a thing recently of Keith Scott. If you guys don't know who Keith Scott is, you should check that guy. He's a badass guitar player. That guy can really play. He's a guitar player with Bryan Adams. It's kind of what he's most known for. But he plays a 63 Strat. And, you know, I was kind of checking out his playing for a minute there because I had that 63 Strat of my friend Lee's. Lee's a very kind person to loan that vintage guitar to me. Yeah, and to check out. And I love that guitar. It's just beautiful. But Keith Scott plays a 63 as well with Bryan Adams. And he was talking about it. And he said, you know, sometimes some venues it's just so noisy he has to go to those in-between quiet settings. But it's an interesting thing. I've just changed out in my, where is it? My guitar. Can you see that? The AZ. I just changed out the neck pickup. I was just finding the neck pickup was just not happening for me, and the pickups I had in there are Damasio Areas, which are noiseless single coils, and then a Mr. Glenn in the bridge. But I wasn't digging it, and so I was like, so I thought, oh, I've got a pickup and another guitar in my Talman. And I thought, I wonder what happens if I take the middle pickup out of that guitar and put it in the AZ, just as an experiment. And that guitar just came to life. It's like the sparkles back that you want, but it's still fat, because those Tui pickups are kind of fat single coils. I kind of describe them more as like a Texas Special, I guess. How does this time work for people? This is what is 10:52 a.m. here in New Zealand. I started about 10 or 10:30. I was aiming to go at 9:30, but I couldn't get OBS to go again. But how does this time work for people with where you are in the world? Let me know. Yeah, I did change the neck pickup in my 520, wherever it is. Oh, it's upstairs. I changed the neck pickup and I put in a Mr. Glenn, one of his PAF style pickups, which I think is called the Integrity, and it's minus 5%. So it's 5% underwound. I found this a little bit with those Ibanez pickups, the Super 58s. They're really, really good humbuckers. But, oh, okay, I'll turn up the voice. Thank you. Good to know. There we go. Is that better? Thanks, Steve-O. Hello, hello, hello. How's that level? That looks to be about the same level. I found with those Super 58s, I think they're just a name that they put on pickups, and they could be made in Japan. Those pickups could be made in Indonesia. They can be made anywhere. So there's a bit of variation, and I think I got one that was just a little dark in the neck pickup. So I swapped it out for one of Glenn's pickups, and it sounded better. The bridge pickup always worked in that guitar, so I left it. But what I've done with that guitar now, and the reason you're probably not seeing it much, is I keep it upstairs in my living room. And what I've done is I've jacked up the action pretty high, and I'm using it as a slide guitar. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to learn how to play slide better. Because I know a little bit of slide, like I can play a few melodies and different things, but I don't really want to be kind of getting too crazy with the whole slide thing in front of people just yet, right? Like it's a work in progress, so I kind of think, is yours pretty dark as well? Yeah, you could try swapping it out. Glenn actually suggested a P90 in there, but I still wanted to, which would be really good. He's got a pickup that is a P90 that fits under a humbucker. I think Lola make one too, and maybe Freyland, whoever else. But that could be a nice option too, and that will give you another color. I wanted to stick with humbuckers because I've got this guitar for P90s, and but that would work. I reckon would work really well. Yeah, where was it going? Oh, so it's upstairs with set up for slide guitar. I'm working on slide guitar, but I don't want to do that in public just yet until I've actually got some stuff down. I kind of believe that you practice in private and you play in public, right? I don't really like practicing in public. So I will, once I've got my slide playing a little better, I'll start to kind of reveal what I've been doing and how I've kind of doing that. And that guitar, I've just set up for it. And it's a really good slide guitar. Oh, slide's awesome. I'm really not a good slide player though. I mean, I can play a few melodies if I have to. Like often on like sort of a rockish pop type show, there might be one slide solo somewhere, but it's a very simple melodic line. That's usually fine. But I want to get into some more stuff. And people like Ariel Posen and this is the reason that the rest of us don't play slide. When you hear that guy, it's ridiculous, or Joey Landreth, just the stuff they do with slide just kills me, even down to like the minute details that people who are not advanced with slide just probably aren't even aware of. Things like the kind of micro tuning, where you slightly make the third flat, not quite in tune to make it feel a little certain kind of way. Most of us are just trying to get it in tune. Well, those guys are going well beyond that. Joe Shu says, I play a lot of slide. Nice. My slide rig is a G&L Blues Boy. Those are good. I quite like the G&L guitars. I have the action set up a bit higher and 11s. Yeah, I think that's the key, right? I've talked to Ariel about it, and he was saying that you don't necessarily have to have high action, but you don't want low action either. So, but I was like, well, that 520 is just going to be a slide guitar, so I set it up for that. And it's like I jacked up the action a bit. It's still playable. I didn't want it to be the point where you could only play it with a slide. So say you were going to play some chord things and then you wanted to get into a slide solo. You still want to be able to play the chords. It's got 11s on it, which is pretty much what I've used for most of my career until last year. 11 to 49, and I've been using elixirs for the longest time. Although I have got a set of string joys there. I'm going to give those a try soon. I'm excited to try something else, see what happens. I met the String Joy guys when I was at the NAMM show. They seem like really decent guys and like really that into what they do. Do you know what I mean? And that to me is like, yeah, pretty cool. So I'm gonna give those a crack and see what we think. I'll give you guys some feedback on my thoughts on it. But yeah, but I went to 10s last year because I was getting some pain in my arm down here. When we were doing We Will Rock You, and my first thought was it's just because I was having to play all those solos, lots of bends. A heap of bends like that. You know, that sort of stuff is kind of like pretty taxing on your arm, but I don't think it was that. What it was the other guitar player, Tom, super cool guy, was sitting right here next to me. So I was kind of playing like this, so that I didn't. And even one time when I was playing the DGT, I actually banged into his music stand and took a big chip out of the guitar, the headstock about here, because he was right there. So I was constantly playing on this kind of angle and putting my arm on a weird angle. So once I got him to move, and I haven't had any real pain since. I've had a couple of times when I've kind of been run down, tired, and then playing and doing stuff, and I felt like it just get a little tight. And I think that was partly because I think what happened when I did that show was I actually caused a bit of an injury to it, and so it took some time to recover. But I haven't for like at least 2 months now felt anything with it. So I think it's sorted, luckily. But it was pretty scary. Hopefully the audio and stuff is better now because I'm using OBS. The other thing too is if you've got noisy pickups, you kind of get used to just rolling off the volume. Joe Chu says mine isn't super high. Yeah, mine isn't either. I mean, when I say I jacked it up from what I normally have, and the way I set my action, because I pretty much just do it myself, right? I get, if I take a guitar to a tech, I get them to kind of get it in the ballpark, and then I just do the rest myself. And the way I do it, this is just what works for me, is this. I use these Jazz 3 picks, right? Everybody knows these. These are the XL Jazz 3s. I've been using these for ages. They're awesome. What I like about them is you can find them anywhere. They cost a couple of bucks each, so it's like no big deal if you lose it. You lose an expensive pick. But what I do is I take the pick and I go to the 12th fret and I go to the fret marker just past it, the one that's between 12 and 13. And what I want is I want my pick to you've got to have your pick straight or it's not going to work. But I take the fret and I just slide my pick under there. And that's about how high I want the action on both sides. Right? Like I can get my pick just under there. There's a little bit of gap. So I know this is 1.14 millimeters or 1.4, one or the other. So it's somewhere in there. So it's about 1.5 millimeters-ish, give or take. And that's pretty much where I want my action. Somewhere between 1.5 and 2 millimeters is about right. And that's pretty much how I set it up. Sometimes I'll tweak the truss rod. I kind of do that stuff myself. Sometimes I move the saddles up and down. It's got a bit of room in the saddles in this guitar, but sometimes you don't. Yeah, you can shim guitars and kind of stuff like that. Simon says, I'm loving the sound and how you talk about that PRS. Oh, thank you. I hadn't considered a treble bleed on my P90s because of the 50s wiring, but I may add it for the roll-off. Yeah, it's what I'm finding. What I find, like, it's an interesting thing, isn't it? Because you think this is a volume control and a tone control. I actually think the volume control is as much a tone control as anything. To me, that's more a tone control than a volume control. And the reason I say that is if I want a fatter tone, I'll go. I want a thinner tone. All I did was take the volume from 10 to 7, and dropping it down to 7 makes it brighter, and it's not brighter, it's the same brightness, but it just kind of rolls off some of the bottom end. So if I want even thinner, and especially with a bit of gain, like if I go like this, right, an AC/DC type sound. I go like that because there's less hum. Right, something like that. If I turn my volume down to 5 or 6, even 3. That's kind of almost like a Pete Townsend thing. It's almost like a pinball wizard type thing. Whereas if I turn this up, you can see it's not only fatter and thicker and fuller, but it's also like too gainy for that particular sound. So you can see, like, with just one pickup and a volume control with a triple bleed on it, I can get loads of different things. And I find that P90s can often be too thick. Especially in this configuration, because essentially it's kind of like a Strat, but a Strat with P90s. So I find that, turning that down. I do like the 50s wiring. I have used that before and found that really useful. It's probably the most useful of all the kind of standard wirings. But I think this guitar having a triple bleed on it really works. I don't feel that way about all my guitars, but on this guitar for sure. Like on a Strat, I like to use the volume control as a tone. So by turning down, I can take off some of that top end that just gets a little bit shrilly, or can do. Like on a Strat, like the ultimate is to run it at about 8, and that just takes off the edge on, especially vintage pickups, Strats. Run the volume on 8, and they just take off the presence essentially. But on this guitar, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'm gonna have to go in a minute, folks, because I've almost been an hour, and I try and limit these to an hour, because that's enough of me kind of raging on about music and talking about stuff. Simon says that really is Townsend. Didn't he use an SG with P90s? I'm not sure. And I think it was an SG, but I don't know if it had P90s in it. Good question. I'd have to check it out. It definitely had, like, it was cleaner than people think, right? People, like, I hear people playing that sort of stuff and they go, a pretty heavy tone like that. It wasn't that. It's kind of more that. And the reason I played that rhythm part is you wouldn't normally play that with distortion, but you can hear with that kind of tone where I have my volume on about 3 or 4, which is winding off gain, but also winding off bottom end and making a clarity about it. You can hear all the notes in the chord, and that's, even with overdrive. Which sometimes you don't, alright? Cheers for joining me, Joe. I appreciate it. Got some cool videos coming for you guys this week. I got one I'm going to show a new bit of gear, but in relation to some old gear that I've got here. Something really unique that you've probably not seen. I have a Mesa Boogie Revolver. It's on my channel. I did a video about it ages ago. Yeah, it didn't do that well, and I think that partly because people don't know what those are, so they're not really looking for it. But Joe Bonamass's guitar tech saw it and got in touch and asked if they could buy it off me. I didn't know who he was. I got an email from this guy, Rick, asking if I'd sell it, and I said, yeah, I've been thinking about selling it. And he asked would I package it up and send it to Los Angeles. And so I sort of went, yeah, maybe, like I was humming and hawing, like, do I want to sell it? They're pretty rare, especially in New Zealand. Like, you just never see them here. I think mine's probably the only one here, as far as I know. But then his email was Bonamassa Museum at whatever it was, and I was like, okay, Bonamassa Museum. So I kind of went, oh, no. Text my friend Josh Smith, because Josh plays rhythm guitar in Joe Bonamassa's band. And I was like, Josh, who's this guy, Rick? And he says, oh, that's Joe's right hand man who kind of helps with all the museum and does stuff for him. And I was like, oh, I see what's going on here. But I decided not to sell it. I kind of changed my mind. I went, no, I can't sell that thing. It's just beautiful, and it's so rare. And I've seen that Joe's been out doing gigs and he's got one of those Mesa Boogie revolvers in the middle of his rig. Interesting, yeah, he uses it. He kind of uses it as a blend with other sounds, whereas I kind of like it on its own. It's like the ultimate chorusing, because it's a spinning speaker, and so it's spinning. It's like it's moving air to chorus, which is kind of really powerful. This is what Pat Metheny does apparently. He'd have 3 amps around him, or used to. I don't know if he still does, but he'd have an amp over here, an amp over here, and an amp behind here, and there's various levels of delay in it, so that it create this chorusing effect, which I think is a cool way of kind of approaching. It's kind of like detuning, right? Like the old detune effect that people use for chorus. It's essentially delaying one of the sounds to get the chorusing effect. Yeah, so this is kind of moving air, and it's pretty cool. And of course, it has a fast speed, so you can kind of ramp up between them. So, yeah, but I'm gonna have to go, folks. Thank you for joining me. I hope this stream has been better quality. I've been really frustrated with the quality of trying to do it on my phone. It was all kinds of clicking, and then when I tried to use the YouTube program to do it, that was even worse, because it would essentially think guitar was background noise and sort of cut out the guitar, or at least sounded like it was underwater sometimes. I was like, what the hell? So now I'm trying OBS, and this has been a frustrating program. Okay, why can't it just be easy? I want to connect it in, I want to go, but done. But for some reason, it seems to want to jump back to an old Gmail, Google account for an old band I used to be in. It seems to default to that no matter what I do. But I think I found a way around it. So anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this, and thanks for joining me, and I will see you all next in the next videos. There are 2 to come this week. There'll be one coming out in a couple of days and one coming out in the weekend, and then I'll be back on the live stream. It'll be Tuesday mornings here, which will be Monday night for most people in the rest of the world. Take care, eh? Cheers.